Hi, this is Dave Kahle. Welcome to our Practical Wisdom series of podcasts where we try to provide wisdom and resources and focus on helping sales professionals and business executives sell better, lead better, and live better. I'm talking today about leverage as a key to taking your business to a higher level. Now, whether you're a small business person or a professional salesperson, you can utilize a powerful strategy to take your sales performance to dramatically higher levels, and that strategy is called leverage. Now, leverage revolves around the idea of multiplying the effects of some effort. So think of a lever that allows you to lift a large weight on one end with a disproportionately small effort on the other. That's the power of a lever. A little bit of effort moves a large force. Now, that's the traditional view of a lever. In business, the same idea holds true. A little bit of time, money, and effort can accomplish a great deal when you leverage that small amount of time and effort into disproportionately large results. Now, typically in a business setting, this means that you examine some of the things that you are now doing and then find a way to leverage them to greater effectiveness. So you don't have to do something entirely different. It takes a different mindset towards what you're currently doing. You use the same amount of effort or money, but you use it in a way that produces multiply better results. You just think a little differently. Now, let me give you a couple of examples. Here's one example. At one time in my life, I sold surgical staplers. Now, in order to sell them, I had to detail the stapling system to a surgeon and then train him in a lab to use the products. Now, that was a very time-intensive process. It occurred to me one day that I could leverage my time by training more than one surgeon at one time. So I developed a process where I would have 4 to 6 surgeons, and we'd take them to lunch. I'd take them to lunch, provide a nice lunch at a nice restaurant. They'd attend a short seminar. Some other surgeon talk for 20 minutes about the staplers, and then we would go off to the lab and work as a group. So in the time that it took me to train one surgeon, I trained 4 to 6. That's leverage. You see, doing what you do, only doing it in a way that gets more out of it. Now, here's another example. In another sales position, I represented for a wholesale distributor. I represented 70,000 line items, and I sold them to a customer base of about 30 hospitals. So I would see each of the hospitals on a regular schedule, and I always made it a rule to have one of those 70,000 items to present. So the time I had with each potential customer or each customer, I would use to present an item. Then, one day, as I was thinking about leveraging my time in front of them, I had this flash of inspiration. And the flash of inspiration was this: Dave, instead of taking one, take 2. Wow, what a thought. So I began taking 2 things, not just one, but 2 items. And it was the same time, it was the same customer, it was the same sales call. I just doubled the likelihood of creating a sale. You see, that's leverage. Taking a thing I'm currently doing and figuring a way to get more out of it, more value. Now, in both those cases, it required me to think a little differently about something I was currently doing and find a way to leverage that activity to greater results. That's the secret. That's the secret to begin to use leverage to increase your business or your personal sales. Look at what you're currently doing and think a little differently about those activities. Ask yourself the question, is there some way I can get more out of this activity? Now, there are literally unlimited ways that you can apply this concept to your business. Here's a few, just kind of off the top of my head, ideas for leveraging in your business. Number one, leverage the sales relationships you have in order to create more relationships. I know that's a pretty simple idea. But the people who currently buy from you probably know other people who could buy from you. So you leverage the relationships you have to create more. So in a large account, for example, you just make it a practice to always ask every contact to introduce you to someone else within the organization. Now, if you would do that as a discipline, you would leverage the first relationship into multiple relationships. You see that? It won't be long before you have thoroughly penetrated all the decision makers in that organization. That's leverage. Contractors, of course, this is sort of a traditional application. Contractors can leverage the work they do for one customer to create others by simply canvassing the neighborhood around their work site, passing out business cards and brochures. The relationship created in one job becomes the leverage point for potential additional relationships and sales. So you leverage the one job into multiple jobs. It just requires you to think a little differently. It's not a big difference, it's a small difference. Now, I can go on for pages and pages with ideas, but you get the idea. Just ask yourself, how can I leverage this relationship into more potential sales relationships? Simple question. Think differently about what you're currently doing. That's number one. Number two, leverage customer demographics into market segment focuses. Let me repeat that because it's a little thick. Leverage customer demographics into market segment focuses. So here's what you do. Study your customer base and see if you can find any trends in terms of the types of people or accounts who are buying from you. Is there, do they have anything in common? And find, again, typically your best customers will have something in common. Find out those things that they have in common. And let's say maybe it's type of business or size of business. Let's just use those two. It's, they're in this code number, manufacturing code number, and they're 50 to 100 employees or something like that. So then you say, okay, let's take what I know about these customers, and now let's take what I know about these customers and turn it into an understanding of a market segment. So I then say, okay, how many other manufacturers in this industry code with 50 to 100 employees, how many others are there, and how can I find them? And you change then a market demographic, a customer demographic, and translated it into a market segment focus. See, what you're doing is leveraging your customer profile into a market segment. So you'll be much more successful doing that. One of my industrial supply clients has taken this approach to a really high level, and it's multiplied his business by a factor of 5. So instead of selling everything to everyone in a specific geographical area, which is the traditional way of going about that particular business, he discovered that a number of his customers fell into 2 or 3 market categories. So not one, but in this case, 3 specific market categories. So he then created specific catalogs for each of those market segments. Started with a customer, found that 2 or 3 of them had this in common, and said, okay, I can use that understanding of a current customer profile and leverage it into a market segment. So these catalogs he created special catalogs for each segment. He backed it up with a national sales approach and specifically focused on only those segments. And since he focused on the segment with a catalog that was very specific to that particular segment, he looked like an expert. So he became an expert in 3 different niches. And to leverage his marketing time and resources to places where it would get the greatest return on investment. He went from a generic geographical approach to a highly focused national approach and multiplied his business by a factor of 5, applying the concept of leverage, leveraging customer demographics into a market segment focus. Here's one other example. When I first began my consulting practice, I would work with whoever popped up on the radar screen. However, as I began to acquire a big enough list of clients, I noticed that a significant number of them were wholesale distributors. So I just looked at my customers and created this profile. I had a great deal of successful sales experience in that industry, wholesale distributors, and I began to focus on them as a special market segment. And today I've written 4 books for wholesale distributors. I've spoken at 90 plus national trade associations and do the bulk of my business with them because I did just exactly what I'm telling you to do. Study your customers, find some demographics they have in common, and then translate that to the world at large, and we call it a market segment. Now, both of these examples illustrate the power and the potential of leverage when you apply it to an analysis of your customers. Here's another one. Leverage successes and failures into opportunities to expand your knowledge and refine your systems. Leverage successes and failures into opportunities to expand your knowledge and refine your systems. I am perplexed by the fact that the vast majority of organizations and the overwhelming majority of individual salespeople never use a significant event, either a success or a failure, to add to their knowledge base and improve what they do next time. Just a little bit of reflection on a failure will give you rules that you can use for the rest of your life. Here was my painful example. In my first really professional sales job, I made the mistake of speaking badly about the competition. And the customer that I was speaking to, unbeknownst to me, happened to be a friend of my competitor. And she just dressed me up and down. And I remember my face turning bright red, starting to sweat, and I had no response. To this day, that was decades ago, and to this day, I still get a little tingle in my stomach whenever I think about it. It was miserable. But when I reflected on, wow, what happened there? It occurred to me it was my fault because I spoke badly about a competitor, and I made the rule, which I have kept ever since, never speak badly about the competition. A little bit of reflection on a failure in this case turned into a lifetime rule. I leveraged that failure and the mistake that led to it into a lifetime of changed behavior. Corporately, here's another example. We just had a failure. We had a major failure in the number of people who subscribed to one of our open enrollment seminars. We were expecting hundreds. We did not get that. The number of enrollments we had was a fraction of what we were expecting. So, we could feel sorry for ourselves and blame somebody else. It's the market, it's the climate, it's the time of year, or whatever. But we decided to leverage as much value as we could from the experience. So we scheduled a meeting to thoroughly dissect what we could have done differently, and out of that came several changes in behavior, several rules. Next time, we'll be better. Why? Because we leveraged that failure into some rules for going forward. You see, leverage can be applied in multiple ways in a business and a career. It can be one of those key concepts that fuel your growth to the next level. You just have to decide to do it. Just decide to leverage every event every customer demographic, every sales relationship, at least those three things, to leverage them and gain more value from those three things. Be amazed at what a difference it can make in your business. Okay, before I sign off, I just want to remind you, or maybe let you know for the first time, this is one of 3 podcast shows I do. So there's a couple others. There's Kahle Sales Systems, which I do for professional salespeople and sales leaders. That's a weekly podcast show, and also Christian Business Insights that we do for Christian business people. So if you like this, check out the other 2, Christian Business Insights and Kahle Sales Systems. Okay, that really truly is it. We're done. Bye bye.